Edgar Cayce, the man with no formal education, lying on a couch in Kentucky, described a very specific chamber under the right paw of the Sphinx. And when researchers scanned the ground there, they found rectangular, symmetrical shapes that didn't match natural rock formation. Then, the most powerful Egyptologist in the world called it fake news and refused to allow anybody to dig. But here's what I didn't tell you last time. Cayce wasn't only talking about Egypt. He said there were 3 vaults, 3 identical sets of records buried in 3 separate locations around the world by people who knew their civilization was ending and they wanted someone to find what was left behind. This is the Cayce Files, episode 2. Let's follow the map. And then we'll talk about why someone keeps blocking the dig. In 1938, Edgar Cayce, while in a trance, said there are 3 places where there are records of Atlantis. One in the Atlantian land that sank and is rising again. Another in the Egyptian land. And another in the Yucatan land. 3 locations: Bimini in the Bahamas, which he called a remnant of Atlantis itself, Egypt under the Sphinx, and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. He said the records were identical, not similar, identical. 3 copies of the same archive, placed in 3 places to survive whatever came next. And Cayce said something else that almost nobody repeats. The records are 1. Same content, 3 vaults. A deliberate redundancy by people planning for catastrophe. Let's start with Bimini because this one comes with a date. Edgar Cayce gave a reading, number 958-3, in which he said this: "A portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages in seawater near Bimini. Expect it in 68 or 69, not so far away." In September of 1968, a researcher named Dr. J. Manson Valentine was diving off the coast of North Bimini in the Bahamas. Under about 18 to 24 feet of water, he found a formation of large, flat stones arranged in a curved J shape, stretching roughly 1,900 feet along the seafloor. It became known as the Bimini Road. Cayce said 68 or 69, and it was found in September of 1968. Now I'm going to give you the skeptic's argument because, well, let's just keep it honest, okay? Mainstream geologists say that Bimini Road is natural beach rock. Limestone formed when sediment hardens along an ancient shoreline. Radiometric dating returned ages of roughly 2,000 to 3,500 years old, far more recent than Cayce's date. And it's worth noting that Dr. Valentine was already a Cayce follower before he made that discovery, which critics point out as, a reason to question the timing. Those are real counter-arguments, and I'm not going to pretend they aren't. But here's what I keep coming back to. Cayce named a 2-year window, 1968 to 1969, in 1940. That's a 28-year-old prediction with a very specific 2-year target. And a stone formation was found at the location he pointed to in the first year of that window. Whether it's Atlantis or natural limestone doesn't change the fact that he did name the year. Now, the 3rd vault is the one almost nobody talks about, and it has something the other 2 don't, a detail that can be cross-checked against historical records. In a reading given in November 1933, Cayce described the Yucatan vault and said, and this is the specific part, that at the very moment he was giving this reading, archaeologists from the University of Pennsylvania were actively excavating near that location and had already sent some of their artifacts back to their museum. He didn't say somewhere in Mexico. He named a very specific institution conducting a specific active dig. Researchers who followed up confirmed that the only University of Pennsylvania excavation underway in that region in 1933 was at a Maya site in Guatemala called Piedras Negras. Those artifacts are still in the Penn Museum in Philadelphia today. That's not a vague prophecy. That's a named institution, an active dig, and a verifiable location given in 1933 by a man in a trance in Virginia. Now, nothing at Penn has ever been identified as Atlantian. I want to be completely clear about that. Piedras Negras is a documented Maya site, but the precision of that detail, the institution, the active excavation, the year, is the kind of thing that's very hard to explain as coincidence. Now here's something I didn't expect to find when I started researching this episode. The idea of hidden records, of knowledge buried before a great catastrophe, waiting to be found, appears in traditions that predate him by centuries. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing around 450 BC, described a massive underground labyrinth near the Egyptian pyramids that he called more impressive than the pyramids themselves. He said it contained 12 roofed courts and 3,000 chambers. He saw it personally and wrote about it in his histories. No such structure has ever been excavated. Ancient Egyptian tradition tells of Thoth, the god of writing and knowledge, hiding all human wisdom in pillars before a great flood, so that it too would survive. The Greek lawmaker Solon reportedly saw them and noted that they commemorated the destruction of Atlantis. Medieval Islamic legends, documented centuries before Cayce was born, described subterranean passages beneath the Giza Plateau, containing the knowledge of a civilization that came before. This wasn't a fringe idea, it was a persistent tradition across multiple cultures, spanning more than 2,000 years. Cayce didn't invent the concept of hidden records under Giza. He gave it a map. In that map, 3 locations, identical records buried before the end, is where this gets interesting because one of those locations is being actively investigated right now, and the people doing the investigation keep getting told no. There is a question that the most powerful Egyptologist in the world will not answer. If there's nothing under the Sphinx's right paw, then why won't you let anybody dig? Dr. Zauhi Hawass served for decades as Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, the body that controls every excavation permit, every site access decision, every determination of what gets investigated and what doesn't. He's also the world's most prominent Egyptologist, and he has dedicated his career to the historical record he has spent his life building. I want to say that clearly before I show you the pattern. In the early 1990s, a geophysicist named Thomas DeBecke, we talked about him in our last episode, he conducted seismic surveys and he found the rectangular symmetrical cavity under the right paw, geometry inconsistent with natural rock fracture. Hawass's office denied excavation permits. The cavity was never investigated. In 1996, a team backed by Florida State University received permits to conduct further surveys of the plateau. When a test drill in a different area revealed only a natural cavity, the Supreme Council of Antiquities denied all further drilling. But here's the thing that I keep sitting with, the thing that changes the whole frame of this story. Cayce didn't just say where the records were, he said when they would be found. In reading 378-16, Cayce described the entrance under the Sphinx's right paw and then said this, that it may not be entered from the connecting chambers, from the Sphinx's right paw until the time has been fulfilled, when the changes must be active in this sphere of man's experience. He built a timing lock into the prophecy. Not a lock that any institution controls, not a lock that any government can extend, a lock tied to a condition, a state of the world, a state of human consciousness that he said would come. In a separate reading, he said the hall would be discovered at a time signifying the manifestation of a new level of consciousness. And elsewhere, he described those who would ultimately find and interpret the records as people who stand firm through a period of great upheaval, guided to the records and able to interpret them for the benefit of men everywhere. In other words, the records aren't hidden from humanity. They're protected until humanity is ready for them. That's a very different kind of story than the cover-up. And it's a thread that shows up in unexpected places right now. Chris Bledsoe, we did an episode about him, the contactee whose encounters have been witnessed by other people. He's been investigated by former intelligence officials, scientists, and members of Congress. Chris has spoken publicly about messages he received describing a new knowledge arriving for humanity. Not taken, not released by any government or institution, just arriving on a timeline that isn't ours to control. I don't know if all these threads are connected, I genuinely don't, but I find it interesting that across so many different traditions, centuries, across experiences that have nothing to do with each other, the same idea keeps appearing. Cayce said no man, no institution, no permit denial, no political body gets to decide when the time is fulfilled. That was already decided by whoever placed it. What's inside those vaults, according to Cayce, isn't just history. It's the blueprint for the thing that ended the civilization that built them. Cayce called it the Firestone, and that's our next episode and the last in the Cayce series. Be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. That will help the channel. Come back for our next episode. It's going to be a good one. This is Heather from Seriously Spooked. We'll see you in the next one.